the city that vanished beneath the waves, a nation that once ruled the seas and disappeared overnight. This is how the Atlantean legend lives on in humanity's memory. These very images have fueled imagination for centuries, sparked heated debates, and inspired the search for lost wisdom. But before we embark on a journey of exploration and discovery, let us pause at the source. Who told us this story? Why has it endured through the ages? Plato, the great Greek philosopher, described Atlantis in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias. He did not present it as a neutral chronicle, but as a tale with a moral weight, an example of how a state that had everything could fall due to moral decay. Centuries after Plato, the story took on a life of its own. It has been seen as truth, allegory, and warning. Today, we will not search for a geographic answer. We will dive into the story itself, into its details, rituals, images of daily life, and the spirit of the age it captured. Plato presents the story through the voice of one of his characters. He refers to a tale passed down by Solon, the Athenian lawgiver who, according to Plato, learned of Atlantis from Egyptian priests. In the text, we find vivid descriptions: an island empire, vast wealth, a regularly planned urban layout, temples and canals, centers of power and worship. Plato emphasizes scale and richness. Atlantis had a developed infrastructure, a complex administration, and military strength that allowed it to exert influence over neighboring lands. As we read these lines, it is important to remember the author uses vivid imagery, metaphors, and parables. He paints a picture of an ideal state only to then reveal its downfall. This structured narrative is not merely a report of an event. It is a carefully constructed story with prophecy and moral meaning. Plato describes the capital of Atlantis as a city built in a ringed structure, concentric circles of land and water surrounding a central hill crowned with a temple. Let us imagine it in detail. Picture broad embankments, the gleam of marble and metal playing in the sunlight. Canals link rows of city blocks. Bridges adorned with statues lead to sacred shrines. Circular roads allow for the swift movement of armies and goods. This design offers more than just an impressive visual. It reveals organizing principles, the center as a sacred and administrative core, and the surrounding rings as residential and industrial zones. Through such a structure, power is centralized, while water serves both transportation and defensive purposes. Imagine the craftsmanship of the builders who knew how to blend beauty with functionality, the rhythm of stone beneath the carpenter's fingers, the gentle sway of a ship's bell at dawn, and the hum of a marketplace framing this harmonious order. At the center of it all stood the Temple of Poseidon, not merely an architectural marvel, but the very heart of religious life. Plato describes it as adorned with ivory, gold, and silver, filled with vivid statues and ceremonies that shaped the spiritual identity of the people. Religious institutions were closely intertwined with political power. Priests conducted rituals, maintained the ritual calendar, advised rulers, and at times even directly managed parts of the state apparatus. The rituals of the Atlanteans, according to the account, were grand and strictly regulated. Offerings, processions, and sacrifices all carried deep symbolic meaning. But most importantly, religion served not only cultic purposes, it was a tool for consolidating social ethics, behavioral norms, and ideological education. Within the heart of the temple complex, great festivals took place, bringing the people into unity and reminding them of humanity's place within the cosmic order. Plato speaks of Atlantis's immense wealth, metallurgy, tools, ornamentation, and luxurious goods. Imagine narrow workshops where weapons and jewelry were forged, markets where merchants exchanged spices, textiles, and metalwork, harbors teeming with sails and boats from distant lands. Trade nourished the city and made it a vital hub of connection between diverse cultures. Craftsmen operated within a clear hierarchy: masters, apprentices, assistants. Their creations reflected the society's taste and technological level: stone and metal inlays, ceramics with unique patterns. The trade network sustained not only the economy, but also cultural exchange. From the sea came ideas, music, and rituals. This was a world where material prosperity intertwined with cultural flourishing. The Atlanteans possessed a powerful navy. Plato emphasizes their maritime strength. This was not merely a war machine. The fleet symbolized control over trade routes, the ability to project power, and the capacity to swiftly respond to threats. Picture shipyards where skilled shipwrights fit planks, set sails, and line hulls. Camps where rowers trained in rhythm and endurance. Command platforms where maneuvers were carefully strategized. Military discipline was closely tied to prestige. Serving in the Navy or Army was a path to social advancement. Plato underscores the discipline and organization of the Atlantean military. Its structure, mobilization strategies, and constant training made it both a threat to neighboring nations and a guarantor of security for its own ventures. But this strength also bred temptation, the desire to conquer and dominate, which Plato presents as one of the key mechanisms behind their moral decline. Behind the splendor of temples and the might of fleets lies everyday life. Families raising children, workers heading to market, artists painting panels, musicians whose melodies drifted along the harbors. Plato offers a glimpse of a civilization where aesthetics and ethics were woven into daily existence. Children learned crafts, the youth pursued education, and the elders passed down legends. In daily life, there was a sense of balance, harmony between labor and celebration, between the private and the public. But it is here too that the first cracks appear: luxury reserved for the few, poverty for others, a sense of privilege slowly transforming into overconfidence. These human details make the story of Atlantis not merely about politics or power, but about people, their dreams, and their flaws. Plato does not place Atlantis's downfall in a vacuum of technology or natural disaster. He provides a clear moral cause. At first, the Atlanteans lived by the laws of justice and moderation. But over time, luxury reshaped their habits. Power attracted those who craved more, and laws began to serve selfish interests, bending to greed. On one side, the brilliance of palaces; on the other, the corrosive force of pride. This is a growing dichotomy. The further they drift, the more citizens forget the common good. In Plato's account, moral decay is not just a collection of private sins, it is a systemic illness that infects governance, law, and religion. When a state ceases to serve its true purposes, protection, education, culture, it loses its inner stability, and then even the strongest fortress becomes fragile. And then comes the climax, the account of how the sky and sea grew dark, how the earth split open, and the waters surged into impenetrable darkness. Plato describes a single night and day of earthquakes and floods that swallowed the island whole. Imagine first the trembling beneath your feet, Then the cries of children in their homes, the dull roar of marble collapsing, and the furious waves crashing through the narrow passages between the city's rings. This is not merely physical destruction, it is a symbolic end. What was built over centuries disappears in an instant. The human craft and ingenuity that once tamed nature in times of peace are powerless before its fury. And in this scene, there is no literal divine punishment, but rather a revelation that material greatness without moral foundation cannot endure. After the tragedy, only stories were left behind. Plato says that Solon heard the tale from Egyptian priests who preserved the memory of what happened. This is important. Memory is passed down not just through facts, but through emotions, moral lessons, and imagery. What reaches us is not a dry chronicle, but a living narrative, full of details about sacred places, with notes of sorrow and instruction. The pattern here is clear. Myth is preserved through storytelling, and each time the story is told, new elements emerge, different details are emphasized. In this way, Atlantis lives on as a memory, sometimes as a warning, sometimes as a symbol of lost perfection. But the legend did not die with the one who first told it. From antiquity, through the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, Atlantis inspired artists, philosophers, and explorers. In poets and novelists, it transformed into an image of idealism and, at the same time, a warning. Paintings, poems, world maps all use the motif of the struggle between human ambition and the forces of nature. This cultural current makes Atlantis a universal theme. It allows us to speak about power, ecology, ethics, and to invent new meanings. And even if some deny its literal existence, the myth itself serves an important purpose. It accumulates knowledge about human nature and passes it on to future generations in a memorable form. Why does Atlantis remain with us? Perhaps because its story contains universal themes: pride, justice, downfall, memory. Perhaps because the image of sunken temples offers refuge to our longing for a lost paradise. But most importantly, Atlantis gives us the chance to look in the mirror, how we build our societies, whether we care for inner ethics, and whether we repeat the mistakes of the past. Plato gave us not just a tangible geographical description, he gave us a story with a moral compass. And this story continues to do its work, reminding us that true greatness is not in marble and gold, but in the strength of spirit that makes a society resilient and just.